Good evening readers, it's Tilly here from Tilly's Shelf. I'm back home after my annual leave, and today, because it's non-fiction November, I thought I would film for you next to our new non-fiction bookshelf, which Bo built for us a couple of weeks ago. What this does mean is that it's a slightly more sketchy filming setup in that I'm sitting on my bed and my laptop is balanced on a laundry basket, and the shelf that my phone is attached to does look like it's about to come off the wall, but we're all good so far. So in theory, I'm going to try to keep it snappy today, because this is going to be a very short review of a very short book. A very short introduction to medical ethics by Tony Hope, which was published in 2004, and it's part of the very short introduction series. I bought this book secondhand a little while ago now, and I decided for this month to try to just leave it somewhere where I would be likely to pick it up, just so that I could kind of passively read another little book for Non-Fiction November. And when I did pick it up, I found that it was fascinating. So I would fit this into the micro-macro theme because it is a micro-sized book dealing with the macro theme of medical ethics. So this book is an absolute gem, and it's only just over 100 tiny pages long, and every single one of these pages for me was filled with something stimulating, enlightening, or thought-provoking. So as you may know if you watched my little rant about admissions by Henry Marsh the other week, I do work in healthcare, and that was why I initially bought this in that secondhand bookshop. But I definitely think that it does have a broader appeal and could potentially help you to understand both medical ethics themes in your own life, in terms of maybe why you have been given or refused a certain medication, and also ethics at a broader population level and in our healthcare kind of lawmaking processes, especially in the UK, because this is written from a UK perspective. But if you do work in healthcare, or perhaps if you're a student in healthcare, then I would definitely recommend this book. So I did, I think, about a 12-week module on ethics as part of my training. It was confusing, it was wishy-washy, it was really heavy on the theory and really hard to apply to the situations that I was seeing in real life, and it was boring. It was actually boring, and I don't like to say that academic stuff is boring because I'm a fan of learning things, but it was a boring module. This book taught me everything that module taught me and more, and it's barely a centimetre wide. And I think that's because of the approach. So very few pages of this are purely dedicated to theory, and the rest revolve around more sort of case studies and real world applications and examples, you know, things you can really get your teeth into and think about and weigh up for yourself. And what Tony Hope does is he gives you the tools to do that weighing up according to the principles of medical ethics, so that you have that background knowledge to apply to cases that you see. Now, when it comes to medical ethics, there are four sort of key principles that you will hear of that you need to be aware of, and my course spent 12 weeks banging on about them, and Hope sums them up on one page. I'll see if I can find the page where he does this. It's in the grey box. That and that. Summarised. Done. So just to summarise for yourselves, the first principle, and the principle that we nowadays see as probably like the first one that you should turn to, like the most important one, is, although people would debate that, like people would definitely debate that because ethics, is autonomy. So the concept that a competent, capacitous person should be able to make their own decisions about their own healthcare, and that their likely wishes, if they don't have capacity, should always be kept in mind. The second and third principles kind of pair up quite neatly, and they are beneficence, the idea that you are trying to do some good. When you are making a medical or healthcare related decision, your aim should always be to do good for the person concerned. And non-maleficence, so that's the classic first do no harm kind of rule, so you shouldn't hurt the people that you are looking after. And these ones can be played off quite well against each other. For example, if someone goes to theatre, you are causing them harm by cutting them open, but with the overall ambition of doing good, perhaps by removing something that's causing a problem. And hopefully you're doing that with that person's consent, so you're respecting their autonomy in that decision. And they have chosen for themselves to accept that harm or that risk of harm in order to obtain the overall good. The final principle is justice, and that one is always the one that is slightly harder to pin down, but it can relate to how one person sits in the system. So for example, who gets the funding for that operation in the first place and why. And Tony Hope also says, so there are four components to this principle: distributive justice, respect for the law, rights, and retributive justice. Retributive. but justice. I'd say the key one there is distributive, really. And if you keep these principles in mind, like a little ethical toolkit, then you are well on your way to ethical decision making, because you can just say, right, leaving the emotive aspects of this question aside, leaving my gut feeling aside, are we doing something good for this person here? And if not, why not? Is it because they have chosen to? Is it because we've got a distributive justice issue and we simply can't afford to do so? And I think having this toolkit is so very useful, because working in healthcare at times, depending on the area, can be a bit of an ethical merry-go-round, with the same issues coming up time and time again with different people on the horse. And these tools can help to remind you to think about all of those aspects of the decision every time and be sure in yourself that you have made a balanced and justifiable decision in this specific case. So I found a little reminder of those principles to be very, very useful to me, even though it's a very small aspect of the book. Elsewhere, Hope goes into some of your classic ethical theories and examples, so your trolley problem, your slippery slope ideas, Kant, Aristotle and the like. I have actually this month also been watching the Netflix series The Good Place. I don't tend to watch series, but Alfred got me hooked on it. So between that, this book and the Marcus Aurelius that I was reading that I discussed with my brother in the video that I posted the other day, I kind of felt like I had a little bit of a sort of a moral philosophy education this month, and it was really just nice to have all of those things coming together at the same time. It was very thought-provoking. And a lot of the topics covered in this book kind of crop up slightly in the plot of The Good Place, so that was quite fun. Hope also goes into a few familiar big topics in healthcare. For example, he starts at the beginning by plunging straight into euthanasia and clarifying a lot of the distinctions within euthanasia in terms of like passive and active euthanasia, and really pushing the reader to think about their views on that. And he takes on global issues as well in talking about HIV and clinical trials and things that apply to the wider world and not just sort of the UK healthcare system. He carries us through all this with remarkable clarity and brevity in writing style. The only bit that I struggled to follow was him talking about abortion and adoption and what are called identity affecting and identity preserving questions. For some reason it took me a while just to get my head around that, but I think I kind of get it now. So essentially, if you have, for instance, a teenage girl who wants to have a baby while she is quite young, and you make the judgment that it would be better for the baby to have an older mother, if the girl is not pregnant and you are encouraging her to wait, then this is an identity affecting problem, because the baby that she'll have when she's older is not the same as the baby that she would have now. Whereas if the teenage girl is currently pregnant and she's going to have this baby, and you're encouraging her to give the baby up to adoption to an older mum, that's an identity preserving question, because the identity of the baby is fixed. It's the same baby, it's just a question of how its life will turn out. Did that make any sense? I'm still not entirely sure, but I think I've kind of got it a little bit better than I did. So that was the trickiest concept, I think, in here for me. So essentially what I'm saying is that this was a very, very approachable book, and I'm sure that everyone would find it accessible, and I think that's kind of the point behind the very short introduction series. So yeah, overall I really like this book and I feel like I got a lot out of it. So it's definitely one that I will keep and hopefully come back to in the future. So that brings us to the end of Non-Fiction November. Of course, many thanks to Gemma from Non-Fic Books and Olive from A Book Olive for putting these challenges together. I really, really enjoyed it, far more than I thought I would do. And I think I've met all of the kind of challenge categories now, even if not with the books that I originally intended to read. So for Pastime and Wonder, I read the Narrow Road to the Deep North by Matsuo Basho, and I also read some of this book that I got out from the library, which kind of talks a little bit more about Basho. And it's kind of like a pastime as well, because he passed his time writing haiku. For Wonder, I read The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius on Serial Reader. For Shelf, I have been reading some literary criticism essays on The Scarlet Letter, which I read for the read-along hosted by Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading as well this month. And like I said, I'm calling this book Micro and Macro. Finally, for Self, I did read another book, A Very Private Diary by Mary Morris, and I have made a wonderful video about that with my mum, in which we bake our Christmas cake and talk about our own family history and how it relates with Mary Morris's personal experience of nursing in the Second World War. The only problem with that video is that it's going to be like an hour long, so I might have to upload it in parts or something, I don't know. But my mum shared a lot of really lovely old stories that I do think people would find interesting, so I will try and upload it somehow. Thank you for watching as usual. Talk to me in the comments if you have anything to say about medical ethics, tell me about any other very short introductions that you may have read, and let me know how Non-Fiction November has gone for you if you have been participating, and I hope that it has gone well for you if you have been. Anyway, happy reading and I'll speak to you soon.